So there is a statistic that has plagued the entrepreneurial world of startups for basically forever. And that statistic is that 8 out of 10 startups fail. And I personally know that because 7 of my 9, so I'm not going to have 10 to measure, but 7 of 9, they weren't all, abject failures, but they were not successes either. And even this number 9, it's not going to be, a better than $100 million exit. I mean, I had that one I mentioned, and then I had two more later. I had another one that was a success, over 100 million. And this one, I don't know, might be 10 if I'm lucky. Might be 10.
So let's go back to that. So what is your gauging parameter on what a success is? Is it the 100 million? Is that
no, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I think, what it says is that a good metric would be, is it sold for enough that people with common shares are getting at least made whole. Okay, so let me explain just in 60 seconds. So all the employees, including the management team, gets common shares. Advisors, anybody that is like part of the company, operationally gets common. The minute that you bring in an institutional investor, they start getting preferred shares. And preferred means, well, what it sounds like. They are preferred in when there's a cash out, they get to cash out first. And there's layers of preferred. There could be preferred A, preferred B, preferred C. And the highest one, the most recent one, gets to take their money out first. So you can have a situation where you maybe you don't take any money in and you build a company completely organically and you sell it for, 10 million, and everybody who had common makes money for all their hard work. And look, it's not about the greed factor. It's that look, you make sacrifices to go do a startup.
Yes.
And you take a lower salary for long periods of time. It's hard on you, it's hard on the family, and you should get something for that. That's how life should work.
Welcome to Design Your Life Your Way, where we explore transformative ideas to help you shift your mindset and culture for greater impact. In today's episode, we dive into the real meaning of success in startups, featuring insights from Jothy Rosenberg, a seasoned entrepreneur with 9 startups under his belt. Discover why traditional metrics might miss the point and how aligning goals with your team's success can lead to true victory. Jothy shares his extraordinary journey from overcoming cancer to becoming a para-athletic skiing bum and a tech veteran, offering a fresh perspective on startup success. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Just search for Design Your Life Your Way and hit subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. For any inquiries and comments, feel free to email us at info@gnggdesignllc.com.
Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Be Your Own Boss. Today we have Jothy Rosenberg, and he is on his 9th startup. And to take it away, Jothy, let's hear about your beginnings and how you got to where you are now. And then in between, I'll ask you some questions. Let's see where we go.
Well, thank you for having me on, David. It's an honor and a pleasure. And just for fun, because of your title of your show, I put a little subtitle under my name just to be a wise guy. But
aren't we all our own boss?
Well, actually, the truth is none of us are ever our own boss, but that's another story.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are many things about my story that are kind of strange. The first thing that's strange is that I was actually born in California, but then we left when I was 2 weeks old. I was actually born up in Marysville, California, which is near Sacramento. And it was the Korean War, and my dad was at an air base up there. I forget the name of the air base, but his time was up and 2 weeks after I was born. And he still had to finish his residency as a surgeon. And so he had a thing set up at Washington University. So we spent 4 years in St. Louis, and then my parents were both doctors, and they decided they wanted to try, I guess, private practice. So they moved to Syracuse, New York. We were there for 4 years, and then they decided, no, we don't like private practice, and they both found university jobs at Wayne State University in Detroit.
Wow.
So technically, I say that I really grew up in Detroit because we were there from age 8 until all the way, and I even went to college there. So in fact, I started to like, you develop an affinity for a few subjects, sometimes pretty early. And for my case, it was because of a teacher. I developed this affinity for my math teacher in high school. And I was in AP math, and I loved math. And it was I think what I loved is that there was no ambiguity in the homework. You either got the answer right or you got it wrong. And I liked that a lot. It was like, also, he had us fold the paper vertically, and you had to write your name and your some sort of, I don't know, class number or something. And there was all this sort of precision. I'm probably sounding a little bit OCD, and I think I have a healthy amount of OCD, not a too high an amount. And I was really into that. I had a major setback, however, in high school when in my junior year in October, where it's already a little cold in Michigan, we were inside, and the exercise or activity was jumping rope. And in midair, my right knee froze, bent, and I went crashing to the ground, screaming in agony. And I won't go through the details of that, but it turns out it was cancer in my bone, and I had to have my right leg amputated at the age of 16. And that was tough, very tough to deal with. And they warned me that it was a very aggressive cancer, and that they needed to be on the lookout for it to spread. Back then, they didn't fit you for a prosthesis until you'd had the healing going on for 6 months. And so I was back to school on crutches, which was horrible because everybody was freaked out by it and wouldn't have anything to do with me. And it was a very lonely time. And all my friends ran for the hills and had nothing to do with me. So it was bad. So after 6 months, I did get fitted with a prosthesis, and they were really primitive in those days. They were made out of balsa wood, and they had this mechanical knee that if you had to, in order for it to work, you had to have it straight and put your weight on. And if you didn't, if the heel came down on a crack in the sidewalk or a extension cord, the knee wouldn't straighten and you'd go down all the time. And so it was hard to learn. And you start off on 2 crutches, then 1, then a cane. And I used a cane for years to get that right. And then I was very relieved when high school was over because I still had no friends. Right. And I thought I could start fresh in college, and I did. I went to Kalamazoo College. I didn't apply. I did so many weird things. I didn't apply to a single other school. I applied to Kalamazoo for early admission, and it was like make or break. I mean, anyway, luckily.
Was there a reason why you went to Kalamazoo, or just?
Well, I wanted to be not too far. I had to go for checkups every 6 months, and
okay, all right,
and I felt like I needed to not be. So that was. I didn't want to be right in living at home. That's for sure.
Right.
My relationship with my dad was always a bit challenging. He was a tough guy, and so I didn't want to be home, but I didn't want to be too far. So 2.5 hours to Kalamazoo was just about perfect. And it was a small school. It was actually smaller than my high school.
Wow.
1,400 kids total in the college, but it was a very good school, and I was a good student, so that was a good fit.
Right. And then you just carried your mathematics, and that's
I did, but what was starting to show up was schools, big schools, which we were affiliated with a big school, had big computer. And in math class, we were getting exposed to programming, and it had that precision that I loved, and, some people find it really annoying for a discipline where if you leave out a semicolon, the whole thing breaks. And some people find that to be a little bit, annoying. Still, to me, that was the precision that was so
Yeah.
appealing.
So you had the old mainframes at the university, or what was
Yeah,
the
we did.
setup for the computing? Yeah.
So programming was either on those really old headbanger type, teletypes or cards. I mean,
Yeah.
literally,
I
huge decks
remember
of
those.
cards.
Yeah.
I
I
did.
was
I
I was at my university. We had the last 2 years, or the first 2 years of my college, was utilizing a mainframe in the basement of an engineering building. And it was archaic, and it was also fun too, because you really understood ones and zeros, to the point where the cards are, taking your code and putting it to ones and zeros. Is very interesting. And
yeah,
you're right. The punctuation, the amount of space you had for each line was dictated to you. And you had the yellow, was it yellow or white and green sheets? There were like 11 by 17 that you could fill out. I think this was at the time where they're transitioning to more of a input from the cards, but they still had the cards. So it was an interesting process for it, just to get the data in, and then
yeah.
let alone get the data out. So,
So, like I said, I went. I was told to go in for a checkup every 6 months,
uh
and I did it just so that my parents wouldn't like bother me, because I didn't. I mean, so I was 19 now. 19, you think you're, immortal. You just don't think bad things can happen, even though something bad had happened. I was trying to move on. Now, one of the problems was that I was surrounded by negativity from the moment that happened at 16 on, because everybody was telling me, well, you can't ski again. You can't ski with one ski. They didn't know any better. You can't swim. I was on the swim team. I was very good in early high school, and they said you'll just go in a circle, and it was just constant. And so I was fighting back against that. I realized that no, these people are wrong, and I can work hard at these things and get good. And that was the saving grace for me to build back my self-esteem, was to be good at a sport. And I got to be very good at skiing and very good at swimming again, and biking as well. So I became a very serious athlete. But I went in for a checkup again in my sophomore year, and I combined it with getting some wisdom teeth out. And I was still in the chair for the oral surgery, and I was a little groggy because they do kind of sedate you quite a bit for
right.
that. And somebody came down from the lab where I'd done my standard x-ray and blood tests, and they said, Jothy, you won't be going home after this. You'll be checking in. Uh, You have to have a lung removed tomorrow morning. And the cancer had spread.
Ugh.
And so this was a huge double whammy. And it happened really fast, because
Right.
now it was an emergency, because they knew it was spreading. And they told me, the doctor said, well, when it spreads, no one ever survives. That's what they said. But this was the year that chemotherapy had just come out.
Oh,
So
really?
they really shouldn't have said that. And they said, we're going to put you on this chemotherapy. We don't know if it's going to work. And you're probably, going to be taking care of your affairs, whatever that meant. And so I couldn't finish that semester because I was
Ugh.
actually in the hospital for 3 weeks. So then I was on chemo for a year, and chemo was rough. All my hair fell out. I got to have a full beard. Back then, my beard wasn't gray, of course. It was dark brown, and I was bald from here up. So I looked kind of mean, because, bald head, beard,
Beard.
and not feeling very good. And I was kind of at Kalamazoo, when I went back after all this, the people that knew me would introduce me to the poor freshmen. They would say, this is Sarge, and you should be careful around him. And I played the part quite well of being a mean guy. But I was going through school and trying to take tests when, chemo would be, you'd have 5 days of injections of 4 different drugs. All the drugs made you extremely sick. So when you get an injection, you are going to spend the rest of the evening throwing up in a bowl.
Mhm.
And then you got 3 weeks to let your body
Mhm.
recover, and then you did it again. And that went on for 10 months. And it was hard to go to school during that time. And I just sort of, I don't know, I just willed myself to get through it. And when the day that chemo ended, I said, I'm done. I quit school. And I drove to Alta, Utah. And I said, look, if I'm going to die, I want to die doing something I love, which was going to be skiing. And so I went out there to become a ski bum, and I got a job at a lodge where I was a pot washer, and I got a season's pass and free room and board and $100 a month spending money, which I spent on beer and foosball. And I skied every day for 100 days. And
Wow.
I truly got to be a black diamond expert skier on one leg.
Wow.
And it was like a dream to ski that well again. I skied better than I'd ever skied on two legs.
Two legs, yeah.
And then the snow melted and I wasn't dead, and I couldn't think of anything better to do, but I guess I'll go back and finish school. And then the same thing about, well, what should I do after I graduate? I don't know. I can't imagine getting a job because, once you've been told you're going to die,
Everything.
and there's no gate you go through that says, hallelujah, you're going to be fine now. There's nothing like that. So this monkey on my shoulder
still there.
was there forever.
Yeah.
And it only slowly went away as more time passed. But I met a girl who I've now been married to for 45 years. We just celebrated our 45th anniversary last weekend.
Yep. Congrats.
And I had gone ahead and said, okay, I can't think of anything better to do. So I'm going to I love math. So I got into a master's in math program at Northwestern University, and I was excited about it. But then I met her. Her name's Carol. And I met her in Detroit, and we were both working in the same place. And she had gotten accepted for grad school at Duke. And I knew our relationship was way too fresh for it to survive the distance.
Yep.
So I called up Duke and I said, I want to apply. And they said, what are you, nuts? You're past every deadline we have. What department do you want to, apply to? And I said, computer science, PhD. I made that up. I just made that up. And they said, okay, well, send us your stuff and we'll look at it, but it'll probably be for, next year.
Yeah.
And you certainly, just so you know, you certainly will not be getting any kind of a stipend. They called me back up and they said, okay, you're accepted and you have a full scholarship.
Where did that come from?
Well, I'd gotten a perfect score on the GRE exam.
Dear God.
And I had done really well at Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo was one of these places that you could get actually better than a 4.0. One of the benefits of not having, not being able to do everything with everybody was that I sat in my room and studied a lot.
Right.
I studied a lot.
Yep.
Anyway, they let me in and we moved down there, and I was in computer science. And part of the reason I picked PhD was people said, oh, no, you better not do that. You better get a master's first. Then you'll be ready to do a PhD. I said, no, I'm going straight for the PhD. If it's really hard, I'm doing it. And that has always been my attitude. And that attitude is also helped me in terms of startups. But here's how that happened. So it took me 5 years to get a PhD. So,
right. What was you said computer science. So what was your topic that you had for your PhD?
It was VLSI design, which is really, it just means using computers to aid the process of designing a silicon chip. And before that, it was really like programming an assembly language when you were designing a chip. You had to specify that, here's where the polysilicon is, and here's where the aluminum wires are, and here's where the diffusion is. And we thought, my advisor and I thought, there's a better way. We can actually specify that this is a transistor. Don't make me make the transistor from its little, chemical components. And so we were trying to do a very high level version of design. And one of the big problems was, and this was where there's a lot of algorithm work, was making the chip as small as possible. Because that was very important. Anyway, that went really well. And I then, strangely enough, and this is not what you're supposed to do, I got offered a job as a professor in the same department I got my PhD. Usually they say, you got to go somewhere else. And they asked me to stay there. So I was teaching grad students. I had to teach one undergraduate course, and I was encouraged, like, as in, you better go get some research contracts. And so I had one with a colleague from NASA to build a single board supercomputer that was going to go on board the space shuttle. It was to process a lot of telemetry data about everything that's going on around
the ship, right?
the shuttle, to look for trouble, to protect it, because there's so much stuff in space. And they were doing all that on the ground. So they would send all the raw telemetry data down to the ground, process it on what they called supercomputers back in the day, but they were not as powerful as an iPhone 7. And then they would send the data back up. But sometimes the shuttle goes right in between the Earth and the sun, and then no data, there's no transmission. And so that's a dangerous time. And so they wanted to do it all on board the space shuttle. So it was a really cool project. And I got really excited about it. In fact, I got so excited that I thought, well, heck, why should this kind of advancement that we're doing, we're shrinking the size of a supercomputer from this giant thing that takes up an entire computer room and needs to be cooled with liquid, and needs, special, halon emitters in case there's a fire. And I mean, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, massive. Yeah.
And we were going to have an equivalent power of a computer on a board. And I thought, why isn't this being a commercial company? And exactly. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I started to explore, well, what if I wanted to turn this into a company? And I knew enough to know I didn't know what I was doing, and that I was not going to try to start something on my own with, basically an academic background, and that was it. I mean, I'd never worked at a commercial company. I had no jobs like that. Anyway, I did know enough that I was going to have to move. I was going to have to either look at Boston or Silicon Valley as the two places. I mean, this was 1984. And Boston that was when I finished my PhD in 83.
Yeah,
so it was
Boston?
actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was still in Durham, North Carolina.
No.
And
I was just thinking, I had never equated Boston with Silicon Valley until you said that. So I'm wondering, why was it? Because of the Ivy League? MIT, or?
Well, so look,
proximity?
Boston is a small version of Silicon Valley, but there were quite a few big and successful companies in Boston. I mean, Digital Equipment Corporation was there. Data General was there. Was here. It's where I am now. It's coincidental, actually. And there were, and then EMC was still a few years away from starting up. Wang was here. So it was a hotbed, actually. I mean, they talked about Route 128 and Highway 101 in California, and in sort of the same level right then. And don't forget, Lotus was here. So you had Microsoft, you had Borland. Well, the order was Microsoft was the biggest, Lotus was the second biggest, and Borland back in Silicon Valley was the third biggest software company in the world. So, it was a significant player, both in hardware and software. Boston was. So I looked at both, and there was a company trying to do something somewhat similar called Thinking Machines in Boston. And I went and looked at it, and I considered, should I go work there? Because my ideas would have sort of fit, I guess, with Thinking Machines. But then I got a lead from a cousin of mine to go take a look at the Palo Alto Research Center of DEC, Digital Equipment, which was here in Boston. But they had built a significant research center there. And Xerox was next door. And they were doing similar kinds of innovation. And those folks were thinking about competing with Thinking Machines. And I thought, well, that's a cool idea. And I want to try to be part of that. And can I merge my ideas? And I convinced them to have a chat with me. And I was, interviewed by the total of 11 people in the entire company, sat around a table with me, and we just shot the you-know-what all day about my ideas and their ideas. And nobody was worried about NDAs. It was just like this free-flowing thing. And then at the end of the day, they said, we want you to come work here. They gave me an offer on the spot.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
And it was so exciting, so exciting. And I couldn't wait to get back and tell my wife. And I also told my top graduate student that they wanted him too. They hadn't met him. They just said, bring him with you. So I did. He came. I went out. The family moved. My wife was freaked out because she's from Ohio, and she was convinced that California was going to have an earthquake and fall into the sea. And ironically, we went there in '88, and we moved to the Santa Cruz Mountains. And wouldn't you know, in '89, October 17th, 5:04 p.m., the magnitude 7 point, what was it, 7.1 or
Yeah.
2 magnitude quake, largest in 50 years, happened 4 miles from our house.
What
It
was the house still standing?
The house was standing. 9 of the 12 houses on our street were flattened completely. We
God,
got lucky.
wow, 9 of the
And
12. So that's a very low percentage of being
I know,
you could just say you're lucky, right? That's
except, well, okay, that's because I'd had all my bad luck taken
yeah.
care
Well,
of.
yeah, you got rid of it early on, right? That's true. But that's very interesting. So that's you're going into. So did you leave after that? What happened
Well,
after that?
well, we started that company. I was employee 12 and my grad student was employee 13. I stayed and I ran the software group, and I stayed there for 4 years, and I just was a sponge learning as much as I could. I watched the CEO and how he made decisions. I got to know the board. I watched how the board and the CEO interacted. We interacted with other startups. Anyway, I just was a sponge, learning as much as I could. But I did see the writing on the wall that this was not going to be a barn burner of a company, because the competition was Moore's law. We built, so as I mentioned, there was the single board supercomputer. Well, that had 1,000 processors on it. The commercial company, which was called Masspar, built a machine which was the size of a 4-drawer filing cabinet, regular wall current, just sat in an office room like anything else you have, like a printer. But it had 32,768 processors in it.
Wow.
And it was absolutely a phenomenal machine. But what Moore's law, of course, was doing was doubling the speed and the number of transistors every 18 months. And so when you double and then you double again and you double again, that's geometric. And it
Right.
doesn't take long, like 4 generations, and it was going to pass us. And when you're making a proprietary system, and then you've got the world's standards, Intel was leading the way, of course, at the time. And Moore's law was going to beat us.
Right.
And what I know now, of course, looking back over the 37 years of doing startups, is that you've got to keep an eye on the macroeconomic, issues, because they could be the thing that beats you. And so I left and I did a small stint at that, third largest software company I mentioned, Orland. And because I decided, look, if I'm going to do startups, I better learn a lot about managing and about, how do you hire people? All kinds of stuff I knew I didn't know. And so I went and did a 5-year stint at Borland, and I ultimately was running their languages division. And so I also learned how to manage a P&L of over 300 million. So it was really good. I mean, it was something told me to go do it, and I'm glad I did, because I needed all that. But then Borland moved me to Boston because we were acquiring a company, a startup, and I needed to go. It was going to be part of my division, and I needed to go babysit that through the process of getting acquired. And so I did that. And then, Borland started to get into some financial trouble, and I decided I wasn't going to go back. That was originally the plan. We liked Boston, and we've been here for 31 years since then. And I immediately decided I was going to do a startup, and I'm not going to go through all the startups, but I'll just go through this one.
Yes.
Because this one, we started 5 of us, and we had 2 investors, a VC, Charles River Ventures, one of the top in Boston, and Fidelity. investments. So Fidelity Investments also had a VC business, and they invested a total of 4 million. I think that's right, 4 million. And we had 2 million in revenue after 2 years, and we were bought for 106 million.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I appreciate that. It comes down to, all the instances of, persevering and being able to tackle where where you don't have any information on, like know the unknowns, right? There's the knowns, there's the unknowns that you don't know, and then the ones you do know. It's always addressing the ones you just don't know what you don't know. So for your perspective now, after you've done, you're on your 9 startup. What's your kind of like, what's your crystal ball in this last 5 to 10 minutes of what do you see your industry going, and how are you going to push in whatever direction you feel like it's going to go or where it needs to go?
Okay, so there is a statistic that has plagued the entrepreneurial world of startups for basically forever. And that statistic is that 8 out of 10 startups fail. And I personally know that because 7 of my 9, so I'm not going to have 10 to measure, but 7 of 9, they weren't all, abject failures, but they were not successes either. And even this number 9, it's not going to be, a better than $100 million exit. I mean, I had that one I mentioned, and then I had two more later. I had another one that was a success, over 100 million. And this one, I don't know, might be 10 if I'm lucky. Might be 10.
So let's go back to that. So what is your gauging parameter on what a success is? Is it the 100 million? Is that
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I think what it says is that a good metric would be, is it sold for enough that people with common shares are getting at least made whole. Okay, so let me explain just in 60 seconds. So all the employees, including the management team, gets common shares. Advisors, anybody that is like part of the company, operationally gets common. At the minute that you bring in an institutional investor, they start getting preferred shares. And preferred means, well, what it sounds like. They are preferred in when there's a cash out, they get to cash out first.
Yep.
And there's layers of preferred. There could be preferred A, preferred B, preferred C. And the highest one, the most recent one, gets to take their money out first. So you can have a situation where you maybe you don't take any money in, and you build a company completely organically, and you sell it for 10 million, and everybody who had common makes money for all their hard work. And look, it's not about the greed factor. It's that look, you make sacrifices to go do a startup.
Yes.
And you take a lower salary for long periods of time. It's hard on you. It's hard on the family. And you should get something for that. That's how life should work. And so I'm saying if you have gone kind of a long time and you've had to raise Series A and then Series B and Series C, common is probably diluted extremely, a lot. And so I would like to say the measure of success is that those people who have common are paid back for the years that they've worked. That's all.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Making sure that when we say company, includes employees, includes everybody who's staked themselves into the company, made whole.
Right. I mean, so for example, Dover has my current ninth one is so diluted because we had to raise a lot of money that even as CEO holding a lot of common, I'm the largest shareholder. If we sold it without there being any other provisions, if we sold it, I would get zero. For 10 million, I would get zero. That's right. Zero. The money won't make it through the preferred stack to common.
There's so much above you that you won't see anything.
And so so this is a message for everybody that, if you're the part of the founding team, you can protect yourselves from that by making sure that there are what are called carve outs for, and it's done as a way to make sure that the founding team is incentivized to keep working hard, even
Mhm.
if they've gotten diluted to a great degree. There's two ways to make sure of that. There's convert them to something that does participate in an early,
Right.
allocation of the dollars, or something that's called a carve out, which just says, here's some cash right off the top that goes to management first, or management/founders. Then it goes through the normal process. And
Gotcha.
it took me a long time to learn that. And I learned that with Dover, and I've protected myself.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate it. The one question I have for you, and I don't know if you're keeping up with this, is the IPO for SpaceX and what your take on that is. If you've heard
I've
kept
been
up with
reading
that.
about it, and if I had a Tesla, I would have sold it immediately once I saw how this gentleman behaves. So, y- you know, an individual human being worth $1 trillion, that's just something's extremely wrong with the economic system, the society that that
That
supports that.
allows it. Well, how does I
When
mean, how does that I mean, I'm still wrapped around my head trying to think out how can you evaluate it, and where's the insurers that's saying that that is evaluated at that price without any just it's just like willy-nilly. It's like the people in the hen house are the foxes, and they're just making whatever deals they can, and it's
Well,
just so
yeah,
out there.
and they're getting away with it because right now we're unfortunately living with an administration that acts the same way.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's all about greed and grift and getting as rich as you can, unfortunately, off the taxpayers. And I'm showing my political bias, but I guess that's fair.
yeah, and I maybe we'll leave it at that, but I do appreciate your story. I mean, it is harrowing, and it seems like you said before, you got rid of the unluckiness up front, and then you just plowed through the rest of what you're doing with that. I mean, it's almost like I don't want to say put words in your mouth. It seemed like it put a chip on your shoulder to prove yourself that you're more than that. That what your early life encounters.
It's it's true. It is true. And but the other thing that's happened, and this is something that happens to I think a lot of people, is that I mean, you asked, what are you going to do next? And what I'm trying to do now is deal with that statistic that I don't like, the 8 out of 10 fails.
For yeah.
And and uh, and I've done things. I wrote this book called Tech Startup Toolkit. I've got a podcast. You've been on it, called Designing Successful Startups, which tells the stories of a lot of founders. I've recorded 116 episodes, and a set of an online program, a set of courses for that whatever stage a founder, a team is at. I've got materials for them that can help them, even if they've done it before, it can help refresh them about what should you be doing right now? What's the priority? How do you know you're being successful? Let's say it's about product market fit. How do you know that you're making progress on proving product market fit? And how do you evaluate after that a little bit? How do you evaluate your go to market strategy? So I'm building materials that are specifically aimed at helping wipe out that statistic and make it be 8 out of 10 startups succeed who embrace the stuff that I'm,
Yeah,
put. That's my
right.
goal.
That's great. We'll ensure that the links are in the comments for anybody wanting to get more out of your insights and your experience in that realm of startups. I appreciate your time, Jothry, and let's let's keep the let's keep the dialogue going. So I appreciate
Great.
your time.
Thank you for giving me the time. It was a pleasure to be able to talk to you about this.
Thank you, and for our audience, stay tuned for additional episodes of Be Your Own Boss. And thanks very much. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on Design Your Life Your Way. We hope today's insights have inspired you to rethink what success means and to align your goals with your team's achievements. Remember, True victory is about fairness and ensuring everyone involved benefits from their hard work. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube to stay updated with our latest episodes. We love hearing from you, so feel free to reach out with any inquiries or comments at info@gngdesignllc.com. Until next time, keep designing your life your way.